guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I am doing my best books of 2023 video. These were all of my favorite books that I read throughout the year, and very quickly, if you want to see any extreme horror, I did a full separate video for just extreme horror because I read so much that I loved this year. So I will leave that video linked up above and down below. So these are just going to be my general horror, thriller, nonfiction, everything in between favorites from the year. So I have 9 fiction books and I have 3 nonfiction that I really wanted to talk about. I read 183 books in 2023 and it was kind of a lot. It was too much. I plan on slowing down in 2024, and I had a lot of, like, looking back, I had less 5 stars than I thought I did. Like, I didn't have a ton of 5-star reads, and like I said, a lot of them were extreme horror, the ones that I did have, so these were the other ones that I had. But looking back, I just had a lot of, like, mediocre reads this year. I don't know, a lot of 3 stars, a lot of 2 stars, like, books that were just okay. So I hope that I have a better 2024. Like, I hope I read less books, but higher quality. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. These are in no particular order. I didn't, like, put them in order or anything, okay? I'm just gonna go ahead and get started with my favorite general horror books. And the first one is no surprise. If I had to pick a favorite, it would be this one. It's Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. I feel like this is on almost everyone's favorite books of the year because this is just simply too good. So this is a book about this husband and wife. They win this, like, affordable housing lottery and they get set up in this fancy apartment. There's, like, famous rich people that live there, but there's just something weird going on in this apartment. They have a baby. There's just something weird going on. There's weird things going on with the baby. Something's just not quite right in this apartment. Our main character is paralyzed, so she's in a wheelchair, and she's also dealing with postpartum depression. It handles those topics really, really well. This is giving such strong Rosemary's Baby vibes, but not quite the same. Like, just the same overall tone and atmosphere. It is so freaking well done, so well written. One of the very few general horror books that actually, like, creeped me out in a couple scenes. Like, I was quite literally on the edge of my seat waiting to find out what was gonna happen next. This is so incredibly well written. Nat Cassidy doesn't know who I am, but he will soon. That sounded very threatening, and I promise I'm not crazy. Okay, next, moving on here. My other favorite man in the world, Grady Hendrix. How to Sell a Haunted House. I love Grady Hendrix. This is no surprise. I'm obsessed with the man. He's my favorite horror author. And this is no different. I absolutely loved this book. I devoured it. I did a full separate video on this one, and this did not disappoint. So this is about this woman who has to go home after her parents passed away, and she has to go meet up with her brother to go through the house, sort things out, so on and so forth, to sell the house. And her brother's kind of a piece of shit. Like, she doesn't get along with her brother, so they have this tension between them, and they have to decide what to do with this house. They are dealing with grief, so it's a very grief-heavy horror book that handles the topic so well. I loved the characters. I love how fully fleshed out his characters are. They have flaws, they're not perfect, but you love them, you're rooting for them. And then, of course, in the house, their parents collected, like, these weird puppets and dolls, and the house may or may not be haunted with puppets and dolls. It's hilarious. It's weird, it's crazy, it's kooky, weird horror. It kind of has the, like, an old school 80s sort of cheesiness to it. It's a little bit like Chucky. I really, really enjoyed this. I thought it was so well done. I thought it was so entertaining, and like I said, I just absolutely loved the character development and the overall exploration of grief. I love grief horror, so this was right up my alley. I highly, highly recommend. This did not disappoint. I just love him. I can't wait to read more from him in the future. Next is Near the Bone by Christina Henry. This is a perfect winter read if that's what you're looking for. This is a snowy, isolated setting. It's like a creature feature, which I typically don't like creature features, but this one was so well done. So this is about a woman who is living kind of like in the middle of the mountains with her husband. It's isolated, there's no one around, and he's an abusive piece of shit. Like, this husband is horrible. So she is constantly like worried about making him upset, just worried about doing something that, you know, he's going to get upset over and take it out on her. So one day she finds a dead, mutilated fox in the middle of the woods, and she realizes that there is a creature lurking in the woods that is making strange noises at night. There's something in the woods. And there are people, there are now strangers that come there looking for this creature, and she is trying to warn them like, hey, my husband's crazy, please get out of here. Like, he's going to be so upset when he finds out that there are people here and that we're not alone. And that's kind of the story. This is very heavy on the topic of abuse, of gaslighting. This husband is horrible. This book will make you so angry, but the overall theme and what the actual creature monster symbolizes, it was just so well done. I love these types of horror books that just have underlying themes and some kind of like depth or meaning as to what's going on and like an underlying metaphor. I just love that. As you can tell, this one and the Grady Hendrix one and even Nestlings all had underlying themes, and they were all just topics that were handled so beautifully, and this one is no exception. I absolutely love this one. Next is a little short book here. This is where we talk things out. This one is so good. It's so good. This is a teeny tiny little novella. I ate this one up. I ate it up, okay? So this is about a woman who has a really rocky relationship with her mother. They've been, you know, separated, not talking for years. And now her father passes away, so she decides to try to reconnect with her mother, and her mother like invites her to this little cabin kind of in the middle of nowhere to like hang out and reconnect. I think, does she live in this cabin? I don't quite remember. She agrees to a girl's vacation away from the city. Okay, so they go to this little weird cabin in the middle of nowhere. It's another isolated, snowy vibe. And the thing that I love about this book is because it takes place over a few days, and it literally maps it out like Friday, January 14th at 9:32 p.m. and then the next chapter is Saturday, January 15th, 2:19 a.m. Like, it just takes you through a timeline, and I just love that. But this is so well done. It's so creepy. It's so suspenseful. You want to keep reading because you just know something is going to happen and you don't know what it is, right? It's kind of giving a Stephen King Misery kind of vibe, but obviously way, way shorter, and has to do with this mother and daughter relationship. Things that mom is doing are just completely bizarre, out of the ordinary. She's not acting right, and this was so well written. It was just so well written, so suspenseful. I love the writing. I can't wait to read more from Caitlin in the future. I mean, this was just so up my alley. I devoured this one in one day, and at the end I was like sitting here thinking about it, and I was like, wait, I loved this so much. And even at the end of the year, I'm like, wait, that book was so good. So obviously it had to go in my favorites. Highly, highly recommend. And then for horror, I kind of have one honorable mention because I didn't originally give this 5 stars. And looking back, like, it's probably like a 4.5. But I've been thinking about it ever since reading it, and I'm always like, oh, that was a really good book. And it is another snowy, isolated vibe. Apparently that was my thing this year, but it is Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi. Wow, I can't speak English. This book was so good. I read this in one day, given I just had surgery, so I couldn't move from the couch. But this is about this orphanage. And in this orphanage, you know, we have like priests taking care of the boys. And one day, in the middle of a snowstorm, there's a knock at the door, and someone shows up with this man who is really emaciated. He has occult symbols like carved into his body. Like there's just something weird going on with this man. And they're like, hey, he's dying. We can't get him to the hospital. We're just gonna bring him in here. Is it okay if he dies in here, basically? So that is that. He dies in this orphanage, and that sets off some wild events. The boys aren't acting quite right. They're taking sides. There are boys turning up dead. It is a really wild read. It's super fast paced. It's interesting. It keeps things moving. It's extremely well written. It has some dark themes and elements to it, but it was just so well done. And I think about it all the time. I'm like, wow, remember that scene from this book? That was wild. But the only thing I did not like was at the end, there were a lot of like action scenes that just go way over my head, and that's not my favorite thing to read. But other than that, this was perfection. I highly recommend. I loved it enough to put it in this video, so go check it out. Next, moving into thrillers, I have 3 that stood out in particular to me. The first one being the new Lisa Jewell, None of This Is True. I devoured this book. I love Lisa Jewell with my whole entire being. I love this book so much. I constantly rave about it. This is about this woman who goes out to eat with her husband for her 40th birthday, and there's another woman there also celebrating her 40th birthday. So she kind of goes up to her and she's like, oh my gosh, we're birthday twins. And turns out this woman has a podcast. She's a podcaster, and I know the podcasters, sorry, they're turning 45. But anyways, she has this podcast, and our main character is like, oh, can I be on your podcast? Can you do like a podcast series about me? Because my husband's kind of a piece of shit, and I'm thinking about leaving him, and I want to do like a whole new transformation. Like now that I'm 45, I want to kind of like redo my life, and it's a new start, a new beginning. So she agrees to do this podcast, and they become friends. They start hanging out. And we realize our main character, like there is something not quite right going on with her. Something weird and sinister is going on, and we're not sure what her intentions are. And then our podcaster, we have this element to this book where it flips back and forth between like, there's a Netflix docuseries now based on this podcaster and what happened with our 2 main ladies. Am I making sense? But the Netflix docuseries aspect to it was so well done because it literally reads exactly like a documentary. Like you can picture this like identical in your mind, and the way that it pans out and the things that were said, and you know, it gives you a timeline. There's, you know, days and times in here, which like I said about the other book, I just love that aspect to it. It is kind of a slower burn, but I love that because it really gives you time to build up these characters in your head, to build up the plot in your head, to build suspense. And I like flew through this because I could not stop reading. I had to know what was going on with this main character. The twist in the end paid off for me, and this was so phenomenally done, and I can't recommend this enough. This is one of my favorite thrillers of all time. It's my favorite Lisa Jewell of all time, and I'm obsessed. Next is another thriller about a podcaster. Listen, as much as I've made fun of podcast thrillers in 2023, these 2 really stood out for me and were really well done. But this one is The Night Swim. You've probably read it. I was really late to the party, but it was so freaking good. This is about a woman who, she's a podcaster, like I said, and she runs this like true crime podcast investigating all these things. And she is currently investigating this case that's going on. It's a rape trial where this like golden Olympic swimmer athlete was accused of raping this girl. And so she's trying to unravel that story and what actually happened, and following their like courtroom scenes, and also at the same time she's getting these mysterious notes from someone that knows who she is and is asking for her help because her sister, like 20 years ago, drowned. And she thinks that someone did it. She thinks that someone killed her. So she's asking for our main character Rachel's help. So Rachel is trying to investigate both of these cases and see what actually happened, and they all kind of, you know, tie in together in the end. This was so well done. The podcast element was so well done. I just loved that aspect of the book, and it truly shined. Like, it was just very well written. It was suspenseful. Like, it just kept me so engaged and so intrigued, and then the ending really paid off for me. I just loved Rachel and loved the podcast element of this book, and I just love the overall theme of, like, this whole rape culture and how men, it's like the one crime that men are always like, they can kind of get off the hook with a lot, you know, because it's like, oh, he murdered her. Obviously he did it. Oh, he raped her. Oh, but did he actually do it because he's an athlete? It just doesn't make sense, you know? I really loved that aspect of this book, and it had a lot to say, and I truly enjoyed it. Of course, I read Dark Corner this year, and it sucked. That was like the total opposite of this one, so I don't know what happened there, but trust me, this one did not disappoint. My next thriller and last thriller is Blood Sugar by Sasha Rothchild. This was the first book that I read in 2023, and it really set my year off with a bang because I loved it so much. This is a really slow burn character study type thriller, but we're following this therapist, and we find out she is being accused of murdering her husband. Her husband is dead. He's toast, okay? And they're accusing her of murdering her husband because turns out she's murdered 3 people in the past, but she did not murder her husband. So we are kind of just following along her story of these 3 men that she murdered and then what actually happened to her husband. And, you know, she's on trial, she's being accused of murdering him, and she's trying to clear her name. But we're like learning more about her and more about her character and the things that she's done. And, you know, she's not like a brutal murderer, but if someone's kind of like near death, she just pushes them a little bit to help them. I just loved our main character. I loved the exploration of her and the things that she has been through that kind of made her out to be this way. It's a good for her thriller, and I was just rooting for our main character the entire way. Obviously she's a serial killer, a murderer, but you kind of see why she does it, and it's like, yeah, girl, good for you, you know? I just absolutely adored this. I love these slower paced, kind of character driven thrillers because they're more memorable for me than sitting down and reading 1,000 twists back to back that I'm not going to remember the next day. But books like this kind of stick with me because I'm like, oh, I loved that main character. Remember when she did this to that guy? You know, and it's more enjoyable for me because I actually remember what I'm reading, but this was just so good. The writing was fantastic. I think this was a debut, so I can't wait to read more from Sasha in the future. I just know whatever she writes is probably a banger now. Then next, I have a book that's just like a general fiction, kind of contemporary, and that is Adelaide by Genevieve Wheeler. This is another debut from this year, and this writing was absolutely fantastic. This was so freaking good. I can't wait to read more from her, but this is about this woman who, in the beginning of the book, we find out she's checking herself into a mental health facility because she tried to kill herself. And we find out that she's severely depressed. We're wondering, why is she so depressed? And we start to find out why. We start going through like her history with men and leading up to present day, and how, you know, she met this guy that she thought was the one, and turns out he was a piece of shit. Very like gaslighting, and you're just following her throughout the years, dealing with thing after thing after thing, and how you kind of get so sucked up into believing shit that people tell you, and you get sucked into these relationships and it's hard to get out of them, because there are times where things are really great and then there are times where you're like, oh, why did they do that to me? You know? This was so personal to me because it was basically something that I've gone through, and I cried so many times reading this book. It was just one of these books that it just meant a lot to me on a personal level, and I could see myself in this main character so much. Like, this girl is basically me. So it was just so relatable to me and refreshing to read something that I loved so much that isn't, you know, gory, disgusting horror. I can't even explain to you how much this book means to me, and just how well done the writing was, the character development. Every single thing about this book is pure perfection, and I want to keep rereading it. I had to stop so many times because I was just hysterically bawling my eyes out. It was like going to therapy. This book was like a therapy session for me, and it was so cathartic. So I can't say enough great things about this. Next, I have my 3 nonfiction favorites from the year. The first one is Paris Hilton's memoir. This is so freaking good, you guys. I love Paris Hilton. I've been obsessed with her since I was a kid, and this is so good. This is so personal, so in depth, going through her trauma and the things that she dealt with as a child, going to that fucked up school, that like troubled teen boarding school or whatever. And this is just following her like PTSD and trauma from dealing with that, and really goes into specific details about this school and what happened there and the abuse that took place. Disgusting, horrific. And I just like admire her so much because she's so open about this and will just openly tell you every single detail that she remembers and how it like fucked her up. But then she still like turned out to be this amazing like businesswoman, you know? And I just admire her so much. Like, the things that she has gone through, the stories in this book are horrific. But this is just so well written and so well done, and I highly recommend. I recommend this to literally everyone. It also goes through like her relationships and relationship trauma and things like that. Literally every detail about her life that you can think of or want to know is in this book, and it was so freaking good. And then leaning into that theme, the other celebrity memoir, of course, is Britney Spears, The Woman in Me. Again, this is another, this one is very short and quick and sweet and to the point compared to the Paris Hilton one, which is a little more detailed. But this one is really insane because it goes into once again, just like the Paris Hilton one, her relationships, her trauma, and all these things kind of leading up to her, you know, being famous, her childhood, her family trauma, really just all this shit that she's dealt with in life, and then leading up to her conservatorship with her father and the details of that. And it was just horrific. I can't imagine the shit that this woman has been through, and what her family has put her through is just disgusting. And so we're really learning about all the details involving that, leading up to, you know, now that she's free and can do whatever the hell she wants. You know, she can eat something that's not chicken and vegetables every day. It's crazy. Really well done, really eye-opening, and once again, I admire everything that she's been through, and these 2 women right here deserve like a fucking award, I swear. And then last but not least, the last nonfiction that I wanted to talk about is Bleed, Destroying Myths of Misogyny and Endometriosis Care by Tracy Lindman. This one is so freaking good. This is so good. It does a huge deep dive into female healthcare and the shit that we go through as women, and doctors not believing us, the misogyny involved with just going to the doctor. It's like we're treated completely different than men, and it's wild, and it really goes into the why and the history of women's health care, and it has such amazing endometriosis representation, such amazing information. It's completely accurate, you know, statistics about women's medicine, and just like the details as to why it takes 10 plus years to get an accurate diagnosis. I highly recommend this to every single person that identifies as a female. And you know what? I also recommend this to people who that identify as men, but will they read this? Probably not. But it really just does a deep dive into our healthcare, and it's fucking infuriating. It does, you know, it talks about racism in healthcare, transphobia, fat phobia, classism, obviously misogyny, just all these different things and statistics about healthcare, and it's really eye-opening, and it's really, it made me angry. I was really pissed off reading this, but it really explains the why behind we go to the doctor, we're not taken seriously, we get sent home with Advil, you know, why I go to the ER and they give me Tylenol, but a guy can go to the ER and get pain medication. You know, it's really, really makes me want to fucking scream, but so well done. So great, highly recommend. Obviously, if you have endometriosis, you need this book, but even if you don't have endometriosis, like I said, it just talks about healthcare as a whole. So if you have any sort of like feminine reproductive system disease or whatever, I highly recommend, okay? And that is it. Those were my favorite books of 2023, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for everyone that's stuck around this year and everyone that's new to my channel, and I just appreciate you guys more than you can ever imagine. So thank you so much for such an amazing year on YouTube, and I can't wait to continue to read about books with you and rave about them and scream about them and talk to you guys. You guys literally make my life so much better. So thank you so much, and I will see you in my next video.